After living for years under the strict control of our HOA, Homeowners Association, they finally crossed the line by raising my fees because I had too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly buying up houses in the neighborhood for years. Now, it was time to show Emily, our power-hungry HOA president, who really owned this community. But would she accept defeat when I revealed my secret? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want to hear more stories about Emily and the HOA. I never wanted trouble with the HOA, but when I found a bright orange notice taped to my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this was war. My hands were shaking as I read it. Immediate fee increase, $500 monthly violation, excessive vehicles on property, 3 cars. This is what it was about. My work truck for my construction business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shifts, and the used Honda we bought for our daughter's 16th birthday. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. I watched from my kitchen window as Emily Walker, the HOA president, walked around the neighborhood with her little clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures. Again. This was the 3rd time this week. "She's out there again," my wife Emma called from the living room. "Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage." "No," I said firmly, pouring my coffee. "We're not hiding our daughter's car like we're doing something wrong. The garage is full of Emma's medical supplies and my work equipment, just like we explained at the last meeting." At that meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about how Emily had smirked when I tried to explain our situation. "Rules are rules, Mr. Harris," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you." What Emily didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been quietly buying up properties in the development for the past 5 years. Every time a house went up for sale, I'd buy it using different LLC names. It started as a smart investment plan, but now it was something bigger. I walked outside to get the mail, taking my time on purpose. Emily pretended to inspect Mrs. Baker's rose bushes while watching me from the corner of her eye. Poor Mrs. Baker had been fined last month for having flowers that were too bright and disrupting neighborhood harmony. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. "Property closing complete. You now own 67% of the development." I smiled, tucking my phone away. Emily walked toward me with her clipboard. "Mr. Harris," she called in her fake sweet voice, "I trust you got our notice about the vehicle violation?" "I did, Emily, and I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase," I replied, keeping my voice calm. She waved her hand dismissively. "The board has full authority to implement fees as needed. Maybe if you attended more meetings, you'd understand how these things work." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Little did she know, I'd been to every single meeting for the past 5 years, but I went through proxy representatives who owned the other houses. I had carefully documented every one of her selective enforcement actions. As she turned to leave, Emily called over her shoulder, "Oh, and the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight at 7:00 p.m. We'll be discussing additional measures about problem properties." I watched her walk away, then pulled out my phone to text my lawyer. "Prepare those documents we talked about. Emily's making her move tonight." Just then, my daughter's car pulled into the driveway. Emily stopped and took more pictures. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. Tonight would change everything in this neighborhood. But first, I had some calls to make. I went inside and spread out the property maps on my desk, each lot carefully highlighted and marked. 5 years of planning, building evidence, and watching Emily's reign of HOA terror grow worse. Tonight, she would learn that her biggest mistake wasn't just targeting my family. It was underestimating who she was really dealing with. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Baker from across the street, crying about another violation notice. I listened to her story and glanced at the framed photo of my father standing proudly in front of his first house. Before an HOA harassed him into selling it at a loss 20 years ago, my dad had taught me to play the long game, to fight smart instead of angry. I looked at my watch. 6 hours until the meeting. Emily wanted to play hardball over a few cars in the driveway. She had no idea what was coming. I walked into the community center for the meeting. The tension was thick. Every seat was filled with neighbors I had known for years. Emily had really gone all out this time. She even hired a professional photographer to make my driveway look like a used car lot. "Let's begin," Emily announced, tapping her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She clicked through her PowerPoint presentation. "Mr. Harris's property has become a used car lot." A few gasps came from her loyal followers in the front row. I looked around the room. Mrs. Allen, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd been fined last month for having her grandson's car in her driveway while he helped fix her roof. Mr. Lewis, the high school science teacher, was furiously taking notes. He had received a violation notice for parking his car slightly over his own driveway line during the last snowstorm. Emily clicked to the next slide, showing a zoomed-in photo of my daughter's car. "This vehicle has been parked here for over 48 hours. She didn't mention that my daughter had come home from college for the weekend. The meeting dragged on as Emily presented her evidence, charts showing supposed property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, probably her friends, and even weather reports saying my cars caused snowdrifts. Then she pulled out a thick binder. "I've documented every instance of vehicles entering and leaving Mr. Harris's property over the last 3 months." I couldn't believe it. She'd been tracking our movements. That's when Mrs. Miller, my next-door neighbor, stood up. "Emily, isn't this a bit excessive? They're just regular cars in a regular driveway," Emily snapped. "You're out of order." Then she handed out a new proposed bylaw. It said each household could only have 2 vehicles and parking should be in the garage. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. "Now, let's vote on the new vehicle restrictions and fee increase," Emily said, not even bothering to allow for discussion. That was my cue. I stood up slowly and said, "Point of order, Madam President." Emily's eyes narrowed. "You're not recognized, Mr. Harris." "Actually, I am," I said, pulling out my folder. "According to HOA Bylaw Section 73, any property owner may raise a point of order regarding voting procedures." The room went silent. I continued. "Before we vote, I think it's important to review the HOA's current property ownership structure." I walked to the front of the room, my shoes clicking on the floor. "You see, over the past 5 years, Sunrise Properties has been acquiring homes in this neighborhood. As CEO of Sunrise Properties, I thought it might interest everyone to know who owns the majority of this HOA. I paused and made eye contact with every board member. "Perhaps we should discuss these questionable surveillance activities you've been conducting." The room erupted in murmurs. Phones were out, recording every moment. Emily's hand shook as she reached for her water bottle, knocking over her precious gavel. That's when John, Emily's husband, whispered something in her ear. Her face turned pale. She finally realized who she had been messing with all these years. I stood calmly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Before we vote on these new fees, I have something important to share." I pulled out a thick stack of property deeds. "For the last 5 years, I've watched this HOA board ignore real problems in the neighborhood while harassing good people for tiny things. I've seen Emily fine Mrs. Baker, who's 82, for having a flower pot that was just a little too tall, while her friend Susan's bright purple fence never got a single warning." Emily's face turned red. "That's not true. I enforce all rules fairly." She grabbed her water bottle, but her hand was shaking so much that she spilled some on her designer blouse. I pulled up photos on the meeting room's big screen. "Here's Emily measuring my grass at 3 a.m. last Tuesday." The security camera footage was crystal clear. Several people gasped. "And here she is, ignoring the Harris family's violations, right after they hired her son's landscaping company." More whispers filled the room. I could see people starting to nod, remembering their own run-ins with Emily's selective enforcement. "But the most interesting thing I discovered," I said, picking up the stack of deeds, "is that through my company, Sunrise Properties, I now own 67% of the homes in this development." I paused as the meaning sank in. "That makes me the majority owner of the HOA itself." Emily jumped up, knocking over her chair. "You can't do that. It's not allowed." Her voice was high-pitched with panic. I smiled calmly. "Actually, I can. I've had 3 different law firms review everything. It's completely legal." I pulled out another folder. "I also have signed complaints from 32 residents about harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious fees." The room erupted in shock. Mrs. Baker stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "Last winter, they fined me $200 for not shoveling my walkway fast enough. I was in the hospital with pneumonia." Other neighbors joined in, sharing their own stories. Emily tried to restore order, banging her gavel, but nobody was listening to her anymore. "I move to dissolve the current board," I announced. "We'll hold new elections with term limits, and clear rules about conflicts of interest. No more 3 a.m. grass measuring. No more selective enforcement." Mr. Lewis from 2 doors down raised his hand. "I second that motion." Soon, hands were going up all around the room. Emily grabbed her designer purse and started toward the door. "This meeting is adjourned," she yelled. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Actually," I said calmly, "according to HOA Bylaws, Section 7.3, you need a majority vote to adjourn, and I don't think you have that anymore." I gestured at the deed spread across the table. "We're just getting started." She froze with her hand on the doorknob, realizing her power was slipping away. 20 years of ruling the neighborhood with an iron fist were coming to an end. "Now," I said, opening another folder, "let's talk about those mysterious pool renovation fees from last summer, the ones where $50,000 disappeared, but the pool was never fixed. I have some interesting bank records to share." Emily slumped against the wall, her face pale. She hadn't noticed yet, but a local news van had just pulled into the parking lot. I'd invited them to cover our community reorganization meeting. The next few hours would change our neighborhood forever, but first, we had years of Emily's secrets to uncover, and I had every single receipt. My careful planning was finally paying off, and the best part was still to come. I walked into my lawyer's office on Monday morning to find 20 angry voicemails from Emily. She had discovered my company's property records over the weekend and was threatening to sue me for secretly trying to take over the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She had finally shown her true colors, but Emily wasn't just angry. She was scared. That evening, she went door to door, spreading rumors that I was planning to turn our peaceful suburb into a parking lot for my car collection. Some neighbors actually believed her, especially after she showed them fake documents suggesting I had connections to a shady development company. I knew I had to act fast. My security cameras caught Emily sneaking onto my property at midnight, taking close-up photos of my car's license plates. The next day, she filed a lawsuit, claiming I had broken HOA rules by buying properties through my company. She even tried to get an emergency court order to freeze my voting rights in the HOA. That's when my months of careful planning paid off. My lawyer revealed our secret weapon, a detailed record of every HOA meeting for the past 5 years. We had videos showing Emily giving her friends passes on their violations while harshly fining others. We had copies of checks showing she had used HOA funds to renovate her own backyard. Best of all, we had emails where she bragged about using her power to keep undesirable people out of the neighborhood. The judge's eyes grew wider with every piece of evidence. Emily's face turned red when we showed time-stamped footage of her measuring my grass with a ruler at 3:00 a.m., taking photos of my teenage daughter's car, and placing threatening notes on my neighbor's doors. Her lawyer started sweating when we presented proof that she had changed HOA records to hide her friend's unpaid dues. But the real shock came when 3 former board members stepped forward. They testified about how Emily had bullied them into approving unfair rules, admitted to targeting specific homeowners she didn't like, and even bragged about using HOA fines to fund her yearly trips to Hawaii. The courtroom got really quiet when we showed Emily's social media posts mocking elderly residents who couldn't pay their HOA fees. There she was, posting poolside photos from Maui with the caption, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this vacation. Keep those violations coming." Emily tried to defend herself, claiming she was just doing her job. But then we played the recording from last month's HOA meeting, where she had screamed at Mrs. Baker, our 75-year-old neighbor, for having a bird feeder that was 2 inches too low. That's when Emily finally lost it. She jumped up from her seat, pointing her finger at me. "He's trying to destroy our perfect neighborhood," she shouted. "Do you know what kind of people will move in if we don't have strict rules? He probably wants to turn this into one of those communities where people can park wherever they want." The judge had heard enough. Not only was Emily removed from the HOA board, but she had to pay back every unfair fee she'd collected. The look on her face when she heard the total, $1,278.92, was better than any revenge I could have planned. I used my majority ownership to create a new HOA board, one with a difference. We elected 5 residents from different parts of the EAE neighborhood, including Mrs. Allen, who Emily had tried to fine for cooking ethnic food, and Mr. Lewis, whose beautiful garden Emily called too exotic. The changes came fast. Kids could now play basketball in their driveways. Gardens could grow vegetables, not just flowers. And yes, families could park more than 2 cars, as long as they fit in their own space. 3 weeks later, I watched through my window as Emily's moving truck pulled up. She'd sent a final letter to everyone, claiming she was moving to a better neighborhood with higher standards. Nobody missed how her new HOA's parking ticket was stuck to her windshield as she drove away. My daughter parked her car in our driveway that evening, right next to my work truck and my wife's SUV. I put up a small sign, one that we'd all voted on. Welcome to Harris Hills, where good neighbors make good neighborhoods. The next morning, I got an unexpected call. A TV producer had seen the news coverage and wanted to make a documentary about how we transformed our HOA. As I looked out at kids playing freely in their yards and neighbors chatting over garden fences, I smiled, thinking about Emily watching it from her new house with its 1-car garage rule. The best part? Our property values went up 15% in the first month after Emily left. Turns out people really do prefer living in a neighborhood where they're treated with respect instead of ruled by fear. Some of Emily's old friends stopped by to apologize, admitting they had just been scared of becoming her next target. We still have an HOA, but now it protects the neighborhood instead of policing it. Every month, we use the fees for things that actually matter: improving the playground, fixing the pool, helping elderly residents maintain their homes. We even started a community garden in the spot where Emily used to take her yard violation photos. As I filed away the last of the court documents, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Emily's new neighborhood watch group. They were asking for advice about dealing with their own power-hungry HOA president. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing others how to stand up for themselves.